Have you ever wanted a podcast that did it all? Sports, politics, world events. Well, you have come to the right place, because you are listening to C&C Talks.
Hello, I'm Colin,
And I'm Charlie.
and welcome to the C&C Talks podcast. This is episode 12 of season 2.
Just a reminder, as we do every week, we release every Tuesday and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It is currently Monday, April 3rd, 2023 at about 8 p.m. Pacific time.
Yeah, we're coming to you, taping this at least right after the March Madness Championship game. We'll get to that in a few minutes here. Actually, not that big of a show this week. We'll be talking, obviously, the Trump indictment, March Madness. Be previewing NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, and a couple other things as well. Let's get into it, Charlie. And by far the biggest story of the week, one of the biggest stories ever in politics, involving former President Donald Trump getting indicted by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. At the time that we are taping this, we do not know exactly what the charges are, but there are believed to be 34 felony counts, Charlie, in New York, mostly related to payoffs of Stormy Daniels and potentially other women, so illegal payments that he made, or other types of fraud. There's a lot of potential crimes he committed in New York, so we'll see what happens on Tuesday.
And there's a lot more of us talking about that on last week's show, so if you want some more on that, go check out that episode, which would be Season 2, Episode 11. But yeah, just a reminder, this isn't the only thing that he's under investigation for. He's under investigation for the January 6th, the stolen documents from the White House, and the election fraud in Georgia as well.
Yeah, and we think that there may be a couple of other investigations as well, potentially stemming from some of the current ones, potential obstruction stuff. Could be under investigation for threatening the Manhattan District Attorney. He made some pretty significant threats against Alvin Bragg. We'll see if the judge, obviously this will be known by the time this episode gets posted, but we'll see if the judge in this case decides to put a gag order on Trump, which would basically mean that he would be prevented from talking about the case. And if he did not follow that, he could face fines or even pretrial detention. Charlie, I have a hard time believing that Trump could stay silent.
Yeah, I agree. That doesn't seem very likely. And also, considering that he's in New York and we know what happens when things don't go his way, I think that there is some genuine concern about protests in New York with some of his supporters going too far, which, of course, if that does happen, we will continue to talk about that as it develops as well. When we find out the cases, we find out what exactly is going on with that, as well as what the possible fallout of this is. We will, of course, talk about that most likely on next week's show.
Yeah, and Charlie, you mentioned potential protests. What's worth noting here is this feels a lot more secure than what happened on January 6th. Why? Well, Trump was pretty much in charge of law enforcement in D.C. on January 6th. He, of course, is not in charge of law enforcement now. The New York Police Department, something like 35,000 troops. They're on very, very high alert in New York City. So we'll see what happens, but it's very hard to anticipate any violence actually succeeding on a large scale, especially since it seems like the Trump supporters that are interested are mostly in jail for January 6th. The rest of them mostly not interested.
Well, and also considering the fact that previously we didn't know something like this could be possible. Now we do, so the police in New York can assume a worst-case scenario so that if there is anything that happens, that it will be swiftly dealt with.
Yeah, that's another good point that you make.
All right, let's move on to world events now, and we have a rather big one. In a bit of hypocrisy with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia's goal to stop NATO moving eastward has completely failed because Finland has now successfully joined the organization.
Yeah, I think that there's still a couple of procedural steps, but it's basically a done deal. Finland will be in NATO. Charlie, why is this important for NATO and for Finland?
Well, this is hugely important because historically Finland and Russia have not been on the greatest terms. The Winter War during, of course, World War II was very important. But it's also a great success for NATO as they finally move into Scandinavia as well. There was, of course, that big debacle with Turkey a few months ago that we talked about. And now that has finally been cleared, we can finally see that there's some more NATO expansion eastward, which is, of course, great for the democratic cause.
Yeah, and I mean, Sweden, though, it looks like will probably be rejected in this. The other three Scandinavian countries all already part of NATO, Norway, Iceland, and Denmark, unless I'm mistaken, Charlie, but Sweden now.
I believe you're correct.
Sweden looking like they will not make it into NATO because of Turkey holding it up. Why?
Turkey is upset with Sweden's government due to the fact that the Turkish government believes that the Kurdish immigrants that are being supported in Sweden by the Swedish government are terrorists. And even though Sweden has passed a new anti-terrorism law, Turkey believes that this is not enough, while most other NATO members believe that Sweden has now complied with Turkey's demand and now should be accepted, but Turkey has yet to budge on that issue.
Yeah, and here's another thing that's really interesting, I think, that's also going on in Finland right now, is that they just had an election, and it did not look good for the incumbent party, Charlie.
I don't know too much about that, but I would assume that due to the general chaos in Europe right now, you have the France thing, Germany had a coup attempt a few months ago, Russia, Ukraine. I'm not surprised that there's chaos in up north as well.
Yeah, some scandal also for that Finland prime minister, who looks now to be out of a job.
All right, let's move on now to Israel, who in the recent months has also had a bit of chaos as well, with protests over Netanyahu's government attempting to remove the judiciary. However, it seems less news has been filtering out. It seems like it's beginning to calm down. Of course, there is still some protests, as well as in France as well. But this is yet again a developing story, as it always continues to be, as Netanyahu continues to flip-flop on his judiciary plan.
I mean, it feels to me, Charlie, he still very, very, very much wants to push this plan through. The question is, does he have the political capital to do that right now? And the answer seems to be no, at least at the moment, but that could change depending on where these protests go.
It does. And now to some international, intercontinental, and even world and beyond news, as NASA has announced its astronauts for the new Artemis 2 program, which will go around the moon and back to Earth this year, before we land on the moon yet again in 2025.
And I believe, Charlie, did they announce the astronauts that would eventually be landing on the moon, or is that false?
I believe these are ones specifically for the mission that is starting this year. I don't know about 2025 yet.
Yeah, and of course that is a decent amount of time away before we actually do put people on the moon. It'll be a couple years, but still, it's coming up pretty soon, especially when you consider we haven't done it for now 50 years.
Yep. We actually have some announcements. There won't be a show next week. We will be back on Wednesday, April 19th. However, we will be posting after hours and bonus content during that time. You're listening to the C&C Talks podcast. Thank you for listening. Let's move on to sports.
Yeah, and we'll start with March Madness. Charlie, let's start on the women's side. A pretty good Final Four. We'll start with that LSU Virginia Tech game. This is a pretty good game, LSU coming out on top. But then, Charlie, that Iowa South Carolina game, every bit as exciting as it was chalked up to be.
Yes, it was. And then the finals kind of fell apart a little bit.
We said, I don't know if we said it last week or 2 weeks ago, but we said whoever wins that South Carolina Iowa game would win the national championship. And Charlie, how about you tell people how that prediction went?
I mean, given our bracket special for anyone who watched that, how do you still trust us on these things? We have no idea what we're doing, apparently.
I mean, I feel like my takes come from somewhere, but apparently it's always from the wrong place.
And mine are just generally don't make sense most of the time, but somehow most of them work.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
The Iona one didn't, but...
The Iona one didn't. And now they lost Rick Pitino. But now they have... What's his name? The Farley Dickinson coach. What's his name?
I don't know.
Tobin Anderson, I think.
Hmm.
He's their new head coach.
That's 3 weeks in a row, by the way, that we've mentioned the fact that I chose Iona.
Yeah, you've gotten a lot of content out of that absolutely
Out of that
miserable
one
pick.
stupid joke I made.
It wasn't a joke.
Yes,
You
it
actually
was.
thought Iona would be half decent.
Objectively, it was a joke. Let's
Right.
move on now to the men's side, which, again, great Final Four, and then a pretty disappointing final.
Yeah, especially that San Diego State Florida Atlantic game. What an unbelievable game. What an unbelievable shot to seal the game for San Diego State. And their first appearance in the finals in history. In fact, they had never even gotten to the Final Four. And then there was that other game, UConn Miami. A less good game, but still pretty good
That
game.
game wasn't very close, though.
UConn coming out on top, and then UConn coming out on top over San Diego State in the finals by a lot. So they're the national champions. Very, very impressive run from UConn, Charlie. I was pretty high on them entering the tournament. I had them going to the Final Four, but they blew past even my wildest expectations for them. They're just a very, very well put together team, well coached, just a lot of great players. It's a good team.
Yeah, it is. We had a chaotic Australian Grand Prix this weekend with 8 cars DNFing. We had a final restart with 3 laps to go. Big chaos, both Alpines knocked out. But race result wasn't that surprising. Verstappen wins, Hamilton's in second, Alonso's in third. But there were some great performances from the 2 McLarens finally getting points. They've had a disaster this season. I don't think it's reflective of how they actually did, though. They were running pretty midfield before the giant crash happened and took out a couple of guys in front of them. As well as Haas scores some good points as well, so that moves them up the table. But we do have a few week gap with Azerbaijan at the end of the month, and that's the first sprint race of the year as well. So looking forward to that. Let's move on to sports that people actually watch, such as the
Okay,
NBA
Charlie,
and NHL playoffs.
before we do that, it does feel though in Formula One that in the driver's race it's a race for third, and in the constructor's race it's a race for second. Agree?
I would agree. Verstappen is running away with it. I think Perez is objectively the only one who can catch him at this point. Alonso, the Ferraris, especially specifically Sainz, both Aston Martins and both Mercedes are going to have a great battle. And I think in the constructors, we're going to see a great battle for second between Ferrari, Aston Martin, and Mercedes, and then a good battle for the midfield, top of the midfield, between Alpine, McLaren, and Haas as well, with Alfa Romeo. With Alfa Romeo and Williams being a little bit lower down, and I just don't trust AlphaTauri at all. They've just looked pretty bad.
Yeah. So yeah, let's move on to sports that more people do care about before we lose even more of our listeners, Charlie. Let's talk about the NBA. Playoffs are upcoming. Obviously, the play-in will be first, and while the teams, at least at the time of our taping, are not entirely locked in for the play-in, at least in the East, we have a pretty good idea of how it's going to shake out. It's in some order going to be Miami, Atlanta, Toronto, and Chicago, almost certainly. What are your thoughts on those 4 in the play-in in the East?
I think the Heat have had a fairly disappointing season considering what they did last year.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not surprised that the Hawks are where they are. I think the Raptors are doing basically what we expected them to do. Same thing with Chicago. I think the 2 teams that are going to come out of this are going to be the Hawks and the Heat.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Hawks though, Charlie, because they kind of went big this offseason. They got DeJounte Murray, a pretty darn good player, and they're not moving up at all. They were the 9 seed last year and they made it through the play-in. And the year before that, through the 5 seed, this seems to be a team getting worse, not better.
Yeah, that's true. Let's look at the play-in in the West now. As of now, we have the Lakers, Pelicans, Timberwolves, and Thunder.
It's going to change, though, we think.
However, the Lakers and Pelicans are only a half game back of the Warriors and Clippers, who are currently 5th and 6th. So those could change very easily, as well as the Mavericks are only a game back of the Thunder for that final spot.
Or Utah could possibly sneak in, though. That's a little bit of a tougher path. The West is wild right now.
Even someone like, I don't know, if Portland sweeps the rest of their season, they could sneak in.
No, Portland's out.
Oh, no, you're right. Sorry, I misread it. They are out.
Yeah, Portland is out, but I don't know. The Lakers have looked good recently. I think that they could get through the play-in or potentially even not even have to play in the play-in, be the 6th seed, or even if I look at where the Clippers are right now, be the 5th seed, and all of a sudden you're looking at a dangerous team in the postseason.
Yeah, but if we freeze where it is, Lakers, Pelicans, Timberwolves, and Thunder, who do you have coming out of this?
Lakers in the first play-in game.
All right,
So they'll
against
be
the
the
Thunder.
7th seed. New Orleans, Minnesota is interesting because this was the 7 and 8 seed from last year, and not but both of these teams in pretty similar situations. Oof, I don't even know. I could actually see the Thunder though actually knocking out Minnesota. You know what? We're gonna have some fun with them. We're gonna go the Oklahoma City Thunder, even though that's not personally fun for me because that brings back memories.
Okay, and so for those who are unaware, Colin, could you explain just exactly how the play-in tournament works?
Yeah, so it's the 7 through 10 seeds that play in the play-in tournament. So the top 6 seeds automatically get into the playoffs. 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5, and then the last 2 spots, seed 7 and 8, are determined with the play-in tournament. So the first game of the play-in tournament is the 7 seed versus the 8 seed, um, and or the team really in 7th place and in 8th place. And the winner that takes place at the home court of the 7 seed, and the winner of that goes on to the playoffs as the 7 seed. So they'll face the 2 seed in the first round, and it's one game. Then there's the 9 seed and the 10 seed. They play each other at the home of the 9 seed. Um, and whoever loses that game is out. And the winner of that game and the loser of the 7-8 game plays another game to be the 8 seed, and that is at the home of the loser of the 7-8 game. And so that's how the play-in tournament works.
All right, so let's just assume that the top 8 seeds make it in. So in the West, that would be the Nuggets, Grizzlies, Kings, Suns, Clippers, Warriors, Lakers, and Pelicans. And in the East, the Bucks, Celtics, 76ers, Cavaliers, Knicks, Nets, Heat, and Hawks. Who do you got coming out of each conference?
This is tough. Don't think that the Memphis Grizzlies are there yet. They've looked really good recently. Don't think that they're there yet. Sacramento's unexperienced. I don't trust him. I think I kind of gotta go Phoenix in the West.
Yeah, I'm going Phoenix as well. Who you got in the East?
Ooh. Can I give you a rematch of the 2021 NBA Finals?
Yeah, I'd take that, but I feel like that, considering the insanity of the last year of sports that we've had, I'm going to go with a kind of wacky one. There's a team that's been flying under the radar all season that I think is sneaky good.
You think it's the Cavaliers?
Give me Cleveland.
And in the West, you're gonna take Sacramento,
I'm
aren't
going
you?
Suns as well.
Suns. So in well, you have to remember, Charlie, last year's NBA playoffs was really, really bad.
Oh, last year's was abysmal.
It was basically all blowouts and pretty much straight up chalk, except for the Mavericks taking out the Suns in hilarious fashion.
And our guests weren't great either that episode, were they?
No, let's talk for a moment about the Mavericks, though. What happened, Charlie?
Oh, yikes. You make a big trade and then you immediately fall apart. Ah, jeez. Yeah,
Okay,
this is absolutely not ideal for them. They're going to be
because
stuck for a while.
because what comes next? You know what comes next for them? Kyrie
They get
leaves in the offseason for possibly LA, who knows where, but possibly LA. He leaves in the offseason. You're left without Dinwiddie and Finney Smith anymore. So you've just got Luka and no draft picks and not a ton of cap space either.
Yeah, so not looking good for them. going
Is there
forward.
a situation where Luka Doncic demands a trade?
He could.
I,
He very
I'm
well
just
could.
throwing that out there. I feel like he's pretty loyal to Dallas, but also I'm just saying there's a chance.
All right. Now let's look at NHL. Looking
Oh
at this.
yes.
Looking at this right now. In the West, you would have Dallas playing Seattle and Minnesota playing Colorado, and
I
then
believe
Vegas
that's correct.
as of now, and then you have Vegas playing Winnipeg and LA playing Edmonton.
Vegas, is it? Oh, yes, you're right. It's Winnipeg, yes, and yeah, and the King and the King is playing Edmonton. Um,
Let's do the West first. Who you got winning Seattle Dallas?
probably not Seattle, but they've looked good recently. So you know what? Surprise me, guys.
Yeah, you know, they're a new team, but I have some bias, so I'm going Kraken as well.
They're a fun team.
Yeah, they are. I gotta say, even if you don't like Seattle, you gotta say, our sports teams, even if they're bad, are really fun to watch.
No, it's true. It's true. Um, I like what the Sounders are doing right now.
I like it too. Alright, then Wild Avalanche, who you have?
Hey, um, not the Avalanche. Sorry, sorry, Avalanche fans. I know you won it all last year. It's not happening again. It's just
Yeah, I
not.
gotta say, Minnesota has been on a tear recently. I think they're gonna carry that momentum. Give me Minnesota.
Yeah, and then Vegas. I like Vegas over Winnipeg.
I'll take the
And,
same thing.
and give me Edmonton over the Kings. And
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on that one. So then,
and frankly, you know what? Give me Edmonton. Give me Edmonton over Seattle in the Western Conference Finals to go to the Stanley Cup.
okay, you're missing a phase, by the
I
way.
don't care. You understand where my picks came from. The Kraken
All right, well,
are beating Minnesota.
I have Kraken
And
losing to Minnesota, and I have Vegas beating Edmonton, and I'll take Minnesota from the West.
okay,
And in the East, who do you have?
Boston.
Is this even a question? I mean, last
Nope.
time we asked if it was a question, we had South Carolina, and we know how that went.
Boston looks like they could. It's not for sure yet, but they could break the all-time points record.
Yeah, give me Boston and Carolina in the Eastern Conference Finals, and give me Boston in the finals.
Wait. Boston, New York Rangers in the finals, and give me Boston to beat them. To play Edmonton in the Stanley Cup.
And who do you have winning the whole thing then?
Charlie, there's a team from Canada that I said was going to be playing in the Stanley Cup.
You have Edmonton winning?
No, they're going to lose. No, Canada last won the Stanley Cup in like 91, and that streak's continuing.
Oh no, I'm aware. Yeah, I have Minnesota and Boston. I'm going Minnesota.
You think that somebody is going to be able to knock off the Boston Bruins in the best-of-7 series?
I do. I think I think it's going to go to Game 7, and I think Minnesota's going to win.
I don't see how Boston does it. I could see them going 16-0 in the playoffs. I think that they're going to end up like dropping like 2 games, so it'll be like an 18-game playoffs for them to the Stanley Cup.
You know, the thing about these super teams, whenever something always goes wrong.
That is true.
These mega unstoppable teams, always something goes wrong.
Well, except with the Warriors with KD.
Okay, yeah, but that's a one specific example. But I just don't see it. It just seems too good to be true for Boston, so I can't take them. But it looks like we're out of time.
Yeah. So make sure you subscribe to the C&C Talks podcast because we have episodes coming out every single Wednesday wherever you listen to your podcasts, and our website, which is cctalks.net, has all of the information about our show. So head over there if you want to know more about us, and call us with your questions, 360-389 360-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. And follow us on what's remaining of Twitter with @CC Talks Podcast. For our producer Morris, our production designer Zach, and our proof editor Drake, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie. See you next week.
Thanks for listening.